Apologies if this has already been mentioned. I did miss the first half an hour of the talk, and if it has, don't bother addressing it again. But I can see very clearly that a basic income is a social good, or it seems very obvious to me anyway that it would be, because it would, as you say, free people up to do things that aren't economically viable as work, but then also necessary. Well, it seems to me anyway. But I wondered if you thought that it was also a social necessity, because in the future, because of technology and mechanization taking jobs away, and fewer jobs becoming economical to actually do, then the norm of having a job will fall down, essentially. Most people won't have jobs because there won't be jobs for most people to have. And this is why a basic income is necessary too. Apologies if you already talked about that. But.
Can I have I think you had your hand up earlier, and then David.
Yeah, so I'd like to echo my friend's point to the front here, that by 2030, again, 50% of all jobs will be mechanized. So this idea that a job has to be a part of our lives is going to be something of the past. This idea, this Protestant work ethic, seems to be working its way through the idea of our conceptions of the good needs to change. So this idea that it has to be essential focus for our lives is a historical artifact that can be done away with in the future, one hopes. And also this, I want to address this inflationary perspective, because in actual fact, there's no evidence one way or the other to suggest that there will be massive inflationary consequences. For instance, the same argument was made with minimum wage, the same argument was made with introduction of credit, and in actual fact, a friend of mine is doing a PhD to suggest that what will happen with this increase of income is people will change. So they won't necessarily buy more, their consumption patterns will change, so the quality improves. So you don't have this quantitative change, you have a qualitative change in how people consume. And so that's an important thing to take into account when we talk about this inflationary effect.
Very good work.
Yeah, we're going to take a couple more comments if you guys can speak up.
Okay, obviously there's lots of technical things that people have said, and you could get into a detailed technical conversation which would bore a lot of people. But first of all, I'm trying to get the gist of what Ben's alternative is. We want to improve people's willingness to work in everybody's best interest. I didn't quite figure out how that was being done. What we haven't spelled out perhaps is the kind of poverty trap thing with the present benefit system, where effectively as you reduce benefits as income rises, you're paying a higher margin rate on your income than people on surtax, even old-fashioned surtax, super tax. I'm interested with obviously the whole notion of what money is a bundle of fun to discuss. In Positive Money's sort of description of how you create money differently from the way banks do it at the moment, it tends to be about a subcommittee of the Treasury sort of deciding how much money we need. I'm a little bit sort of uncomfortable about, a nomenclatura, a highly intelligent minority deciding this for the rest of us, and some more distributed system. I think there's mentioned the possibility of creating money at local authority level. I'm not even convinced that is satisfactory, because what is money? Ultimately, it's about trust, and my willingness, your willingness to sort of believe that I will ultimately pay you back. It used to be favours, now it's something totally distorted from that, and when you lose that faith, you have a debt crisis nowadays. Just technically on the positive money thing, I think you said it was 200 billion a year that we were paying in interest and debt. On one of your videos it says 192 million pounds a day, which is a mere 70 billion a year. These figures, it's a lot to do with how you look at it, I appreciate, and so on. If there is a quick answer to that, would be nice.
Maybe just quickly before we take more questions, maybe if you can reclassify your position, and then you can come back on the money comment.
Yes, I'll be quick. Yeah, I guess if you classify yourself as a critical scholar, you have to be prepared to disagree with a room full of people, so I will say this point. I think it's interesting that I started by talking about this idea of real utopias and trying to address normative trade-offs. And it's not that I disagree that there are large sums of money out there that we could reallocate from purposes that most people here would disagree with. But at some stage, there is a finite amount of money at some point. Say we had another £85 billion through the basic income. Say we had another 200 billion. Say we had another 5. At some point, there is the decision about what it is that we want to prioritise. And I think it's kind of interesting that we're avoiding getting in this conversation and just assuming that we don't have to prioritise and everything we want is there. Maybe that's a feature of utopias in the sense that people prefer here, and maybe it's a matter of taste. Just in terms of the point about what it is that I'm arguing for, I guess that if you talk about social security beyond generalities, it quickly becomes very boring and very complicated. But in a general sense, the more wide-ranging your social security system is, the more universal it is, the more that the system embodies certain principles, which say you can compare very easily what they quite deliberately do in Norway in a lot of ways with what they do in the UK. You open up a debate where benefits that, for at least a lot of the benefits that people here claim, there's not really a sense of stigma about them in the same way. People are willing to have much higher rates of payments to them. The conditions with which people are treated are much higher. There is a much greater sense of dignity to it. And part of the reason that is the way that you design your system is one of the influences on how people think about it, how people talk about it, how people experience it. If you have a kind of very, very heavily means-tested system like you do in the UK, what you get the whole time is this question of, is this person genuinely in need? Is this person truly deserving? That we have all of those questions at the moment is not simply because of the newspapers we have or the politicians we have. It's because we've set up a system where those questions are asked on a daily basis. And unless we do something about that system, which we could quite easily do, then those questions, those conversations will keep recurring.
So on the money question, the total level of debt interest that's being paid in the system is one that varies, and it depends where you take your parameters. And so the 200 million one was one that 200 billion was also from positive money. So I think there's always going to be a bit of variance. But I think on the more important point that you raise, which is a small group of people deciding how much money we should have in our system better than what we have now, which is a hugely decentralized system. So there is absolutely. But for the moment, we have a very decentralized system. But all these individual bank managers, when they decide to make loans, are not just deciding about whether to make a loan for a particular house or a particular car. They're also having an impact on the money system, and there's not really that understanding within these people making the system. So do I think that moving from that decentralized one to a more centralized one, albeit very, very open, so that you would see the minutes, you would see who voted for what, there would be no hiding behind some kind of cloak of secrecy, I think it's definitely a huge improvement on kind of banks running in their own self-interest, deciding how much money to get created. I think once you start to then, so what the New Economics Foundation would say, and what I believe as well, is that the most important thing to remember is what we need is a multi-currency ecosystem. Anything that relies on one form, one medium of exchange, one thing, is inherently unresilient. So if I take the example of agriculture, we have gone in the agricultural world into a system of huge monocultures. And we've kind of done the same with currencies. Try and make as big a monoculture as possible. So now all of Europe is one big monoculture, and the UK is one big monoculture. We'd in fact be much better served by a multi-currency ecosystem where there is a big national currency. So when I need to buy something from a big company, or a company A is buying from company B, well, it probably makes sense for them to transact in some kind of currency they could do something with. But if I'm down my local shop in Hackney buying something and I know the guy, why don't I operate on a mutual credit kind of system where the money gets created at point of transaction and that functions within Hackney or something like that, or local currencies or time banks, as Ben mentioned. So I think that there should absolutely be money creation at multiple different levels. There should be national and international currencies that function for certain purposes, and there should be local, regional, sectorially specific currencies that function at those local levels where we can build that trust and so on. So I think it's a bit of both, really. Hope that answered a little bit.
So we've got a few questions now. I think Julie had a hand up first.